Leo, my radiant fire sign, the spotlight was never something you chased, it's simply where you belong. But lately, haven't you felt like someone or something is trying to pull you off your path, dim your brilliance, or challenge your sense of self-worth? That's not a coincidence. This video exists for a reason. You didn't stumble onto it. You were drawn here by something deeper than logic, louder than chance. The universe has a message for you today, and it's urgent. Beware of a toxic cycle that's trying to return. There is a force, a person, an energy, a pattern that is circling back, hoping you'll fall into the same trap you once escaped. But here's the truth: you're no longer the version of yourself that tolerates what doesn't honor your light. Welcome to Eternal Mindfulness, where astrology meets intuition, and where each word is crafted to guide you back to your power. I'm truly honored you're here. And I mean that because if you're watching this, it means your spirit is awake. Something inside of you is ready to confront what's been hiding in plain sight. Right now, the cosmos are stirring. Venus is amplifying your relationship with value, not just financial value, but self-value. Meanwhile, Uranus, the planet of disruption and awakening, is preparing to shift, pushing you to break free from emotional contracts that no longer serve your soul. These aren't just transits, Leo, these are spiritual spotlights, revealing where your freedom has been delayed and how to reclaim it. You may have noticed certain interactions lately feel strangely familiar, someone's behavior, a recurring emotional trigger, or a moment that makes you question your own instincts. That's not your imagination. It's your inner knowing surfacing. And if it feels like you're being tested, that's because you are. Leo, ask yourself, who keeps pulling you back into a version of yourself you've already outgrown? And more importantly, why do you still feel responsible for their feelings, their chaos, their inability to grow? This isn't about blame. It's about power, your power. And today, you get to take it back. Before we go further, let me take a sacred pause to say thank you. Thank you deeply for your presence. Every like, every thoughtful comment, every time you hit subscribe, it brings you deeper into the Eternal Mindfulness community, where transformation is not just a concept, but a lived experience. Your support means more than you know. It fuels this channel and allows messages like this one to reach the hearts that need them most. And believe me, my brave Leo, you'll want to stay with me until the end of this reading, because what the universe is revealing today might just shift the way you see your past, your worth, and your future. Now, let's begin this journey together. But first, tell me in the comments, what do you think led you here today? And if any part of this message already resonates with something you've been feeling, comment, "I've awakened," to affirm that you're ready to step into your truth. Let's dive in. There's so much the stars are about to reveal. Leo, there's a unique pressure that comes with being born under the sign of the lion. You are the heart, the flame, the performer of the zodiac, but also, often, its quiet protector. And as this week unfolds under the powerful influence of Venus in Taurus and Uranus nearing the end of its transit through the same sign, you are being asked to examine the parts of you that have given too much, held on too long, or worn the weight of other people's expectations like golden armor. The stars don't ask you to dim your light, they ask you to turn it inward for a moment and ask, what am I still carrying that no longer fits who I'm becoming? Venus is now amplifying themes of worth, stability, and the relationship you hold with your material and emotional values. For Leo, this influence highlights the 10th and 11th houses, the realms of career, responsibility, social image, and collective belonging. On the surface, this might look like shifts in how others see you. But underneath, the question is deeper. Do you still need to be seen in that way? There is a subtle but profound transformation happening, one that invites you to reframe not only how others perceive your strength, but how you define it for yourself. At the same time, Uranus, the great disruptor, is nearing the edge of Taurus, creating a wave of final lessons before it moves on. This is not a punishment, but a moment of awakening. You may find yourself agitated, reactive, even rebellious, and not fully understanding why. It's because something inside of you knows it cannot carry the old structure forward. The way you've always had to be the strong one, the provider, the hero, that role has served you, but it may no longer be sustainable. You are being called not to abandon your fire, but to soften around its edges. There is a strength in stillness that the world rarely praises, but your soul is beginning to crave it. In many wisdom traditions, there is a quiet understanding that when we stop grasping, when we stop forcing life to obey our will, we become free. Control, after all, is often just a mask for fear. When we believe we must be the one who holds everything together, we trap ourselves in an identity that leaves no room to breathe, to evolve, or to be held. And perhaps this is the real invitation of the week, to release the grip. To loosen the emotional armor you've worn with pride. To allow yourself to rest, without guilt, in the truth that your worth is not dependent on what you do for others but in the quiet power of who you are. What Venus and Uranus are asking you is not to let go of your essence but to let go of the performance. To examine where your energy has been spent out of obligation, not alignment. Where you've spoken words to keep the peace, rather than express your truth. Where you've carried roles, not because they honor your joy, but because they once made you feel needed. And the truth is, Leo, you don't need to be needed to matter. So pause for a moment and breathe with this. Where am I overextending myself in ways that deplete my radiance? Who or what am I still trying to impress, when the only approval I truly need is my own? This is not a week of abandonment, but of discernment. Of coming home to the part of you that knows your light doesn't need an audience, it simply needs a safe place to shine. And if anything I've said here resonates with the silent space you've been navigating lately, I invite you to acknowledge that awareness. Comment the word release if you feel you've been holding too tightly to something or someone who no longer belongs in your next chapter. Let that be your signal to yourself and to the universe that you are ready to live from freedom, not fear. Leo, your soul is brave by design, crafted with fire and destined for visibility. But what happens when your courage is being used against you? When your instinct to speak boldly and act with clarity is being subtly twisted into a weakness by someone who understands just how much you care? The cards this week aren't just reflections of outer conflict, they are mirrors of internal misalignment. The Page of Swords and the Five of Swords reveal a dynamic where words are no longer bridges but weapons, and where conversations seem to leave you feeling small, confused, or emotionally depleted. This energy points to a pattern of manipulation, not necessarily loud or obvious but strategic, possibly even disguised as concern. It may be someone who talks in circles, who uses your loyalty to redirect blame, or who challenges your truth in ways that make you doubt your intuition. But that's where the real awakening begins. The Devil card doesn't always represent a person. Sometimes, it's a dynamic. Sometimes it's a story you've told yourself for so long that it feels like truth. The kind that says, I have to prove I'm strong by staying, or, if I walk away, I've failed. These internal contracts are subtle chains, often mistaken for responsibility or love. But underneath them is fear of loss, fear of being misunderstood, fear of disappointing others. The devil energy is sticky, familiar, and seductive. It offers the illusion of control, the comfort of predictability. But it also keeps you from breathing freely, from expanding into the next version of yourself. And Leo, the version of you that is ready to emerge doesn't owe explanations to anyone. That brings us to the High Priestess and the Seven of Swords cards that often make bold personalities uncomfortable. They whisper of strategy, of selective silence, of quiet observation. For someone like you, whose power usually lives in self-expression, this can feel unnatural. But this isn't about shrinking. It's about conserving your sacred energy. Not everyone is meant to hear your process. Not everyone is worthy of access to your healing. Sometimes, wisdom lies in restraint, not as avoidance, but as a declaration of self-respect. This is a moment to pull inward, not to isolate, but to clarify. To hold your next steps close to your chest while you observe patterns and energy without reacting to them. Like the still surface of a pond that reflects the moon, your silence can become your most accurate compass. There is deep intelligence in pausing before responding, in watching without attachment, in choosing when and if to speak. That's not deception. That's maturity. Some teachings say that when one steps back from a conflict without losing their center, they've already won. That true mastery isn't in defeating others but in knowing when the battle is no longer worth your breath. So ask yourself, who benefits when you engage? What part of you still feels the need to defend your worth to someone who doesn't recognize it? What would happen if, instead of defending, you simply redirected your energy toward your own growth? This week invites you to release the need to be seen as right or understood. It calls you to protect your emotional ecosystem with as much care as you protect your loved ones. Leo, your light doesn't need to shine in every room. It only needs to shine in the rooms that honor it. So if you find yourself repeatedly drained by a person, a situation, or even an old narrative, pause. Breathe. Pull back, not because you're hiding, but because you are choosing clarity over chaos. And if reading this already stirs something within you, take a moment to name it. Ask yourself honestly, who am I still fighting with, and why? Then, if you're ready to claim your peace, type the words, "I release the need to explain," in the comments and let that become your declaration of freedom. When the weight of emotional tension begins to show up in the body, it's no longer just an inner struggle, it's a signal, and the body becomes the messenger. For Leo, whose element is fire and whose natural instinct is to act, perform, and radiate, the suppression of energy can lead to a kind of silent pressure that builds beneath the surface. This week, that pressure may begin to affect not only your mood or your relationships, but also your physical well-being. Restlessness, irritability, tightness in the chest, difficulty sleeping, these aren't just stress symptoms, they're invitations to pause and redirect. Deep breathing, long walks under the sky, or even something as simple as soaking your feet in warm, herbal water can become more than routines, they become acts of conscious release. In many old teachings, returning to the body is the first step to returning to clarity. We cannot think our way out of imbalance. We must first feel our way back into harmony. In terms of nourishment, this is not the time to fuel your fire with fire. Cooling foods, calming greens, and meals that support your liver and digestive balance will not only soothe the physical system, but help you move through emotional intensity with greater grace. When your inner fire is inflamed, it's easy to become reactive, to let small irritations turn into full-blown inner storms. But when your body feels cool, supported, and nourished, your mind follows, and from there, your heart opens without resistance. The same principle applies to your work life. Are you performing a role you chose, or one you inherited? Are you leading from alignment, or from habit? This week invites you to pause and examine the structures around you, not to dismantle everything immediately, but to gently ask, is this path still alive for me? Or am I staying here because someone once told me I should? We are taught to equate responsibility with sacrifice, but there's a deeper truth that says real responsibility is living in integrity with your own energy. Sometimes, the most courageous decision is stepping back from what no longer feels like a true expression of your purpose. Financially, the energy of the moment calls for reassessment, not risk. With planetary shifts influencing value, security, and self-worth, it's wise to avoid any impulsive spending or high-stakes investments. This is not a week to prove anything through outward gain, but to reconnect with the internal patterns that drive how and why you spend. Emotional spending, especially the kind that compensates for unspoken emptiness, can be gently noticed and released. Consider reviewing old subscriptions, rebalancing your budget, or simply asking before each purchase, is this a reflection of my current values, or a reaction to my unmet needs? The clarity this brings will ground you more than any temporary high. In your relationships, the guidance is simple but profound. Love should not require you to constantly explain or prove your worth. If someone in your life makes you feel like you must perform for affection, or convince them of your value, this is a sign of imbalance, not connection. True love recognizes without demanding. It holds space without conditions. You deserve relationships where your light is cherished, not challenged. And if that doesn't feel like your current reality, this week offers the strength to begin reshaping it even in small ways. One practice that may help is an energy release ritual. Take a few quiet moments with yourself. Write down 3 beliefs or experiences that have made you feel unworthy, unloved, or not enough. Be honest, even if it feels vulnerable. Then safely burn that paper. Watch as the smoke rises and imagine those beliefs dissolving with it. This is not just symbolic. It is a tangible moment where you choose to no longer carry what was never yours to begin with. The flames don't erase your story, they purify it. And through this release, you create room for a new internal truth to take root. These actions may seem small, even mundane. But in truth, they are acts of deep courage. To care for your body, to choose peace over performance, to protect your finances, to step out of roles that limit you, and to end relationships that diminish you, these are the beginnings of a quiet revolution. And Leo, you've never needed a stage to be powerful. You only need the decision to honor yourself consistently, gently, and without apology. When you pause and observe the patterns that keep showing up in your life, the types of relationships, the emotional undercurrents, the reactions you fall into, you may begin to see that the external is not random. The universe, in its quiet clarity, mirrors back the vibration you carry most persistently. And for Leo, whose energy is naturally bold and giving, this mirroring can sometimes reflect a contradiction. The more you try to shine for others, the more unseen you begin to feel. This is where the law of attraction becomes not just a concept, but a practice in self-compassion. The law doesn't respond to what we say we want, it responds to what we believe we deserve. And if you've been attracting cycles of disappointment or one-sided connections, it's not because you are flawed or unlucky. It may be that part of you has unconsciously associated love with effort, worth with struggle, visibility with sacrifice. These beliefs are subtle and often inherited, shaped by experience, culture, or even well-meaning advice. But now is the moment to unlearn what no longer serves you, to soften the reflex that tells you to fix others before listening to your own ache. There is a difference between helping someone from a place of fullness, and trying to rescue them as a way to feel needed. The first nourishes, the second depletes. Leo, you don't have to be the healer for everyone. You don't have to light the fire for every cold soul. You've done that long enough. This week asks you to gently step back from the role of the savior, and instead turn inward, becoming the safe space you so often try to be for others. Real healing doesn't come from trying harder, it comes from being still enough to hear what your own energy is asking of you. That stillness doesn't mean silence or withdrawal. It means clarity. When you choose to stop pouring into people who are not ready to hold what you offer, you create space for a new frequency to emerge. And from that space, your vibration begins to align with something lighter, true or not because you've forced it, but because you've allowed it. Like a flame that burns brighter when protected from the wind, your radiance expands when you no longer exhaust yourself trying to light fires that were never yours to tend. This week, I invite you to sit with a simple but powerful affirmation: I am worthy of being loved without having to prove anything. Let those words settle into the places that have been reaching, overworking, or doubting. Let them echo into your memories of being overlooked, misunderstood, or praised only for your strength. This is not about denying your brilliance, it's about no longer needing to perform it to be accepted. If you'd like to anchor this shift more tangibly, surround yourself with colors that support this inner transition. Lavender, soft, subtle, intuitive, calms the emotional field and brings the nervous system into balance. Gold, warm, strong, undeniable, reminds you of your innate worth and your right to shine without question. You might wear these colors, place them in your space, or simply visualize them as you breathe. What matters is the intention, to reclaim your energy, not from the world, but from the beliefs that told you you had to earn your place in it. Numbers 2 carry frequencies. If you feel called, sit with these: 14, 22, 31. Each of them holds a distinct pulse, one of transformation, foundation, and spiritual maturity. See if any of these numbers stir something in you. If so, comment below which one resonates most. That simple act of choosing is a declaration that you are no longer passively receiving what life hands you, you are actively attuning yourself to what you deserve. This is the quiet power of Leo in evolution, not roaring louder, but vibrating higher. Not chasing attention, but attracting what is aligned. Not holding everything together, but allowing things to fall away if they no longer fit the person you're becoming. And through that release, you make space not for more chaos, but for the kind of love and peace that doesn't demand performance. Only presence. Sometimes, the universe speaks in numbers. Not as predictions, but as invitations, gentle signals pointing toward the inner landscape you may not have stopped to feel. This week, the numbers that align with your journey 4, 9, and 1 are more than just figures. They are symbols, markers of where you might be standing on the bridge between who you've been and who you are becoming. For Leo, a sign of fire and forward movement, recognizing where you are on that bridge is not a weakness. It's wisdom. The number 4 represents foundation, structure, and stability not as an endpoint, but as the groundwork you are being called to lay down again, this time more mindfully. Perhaps life has recently asked you to step back and rebuild in your career, your boundaries, your emotional habits. And that can feel frustrating when you're used to momentum. But in truth, this pause is not a delay. It is sacred preparation. Just as a tree strengthens its roots during winter, so too are you meant to go inward, to reconnect with what truly supports your growth. Building a life from this place of integrity rather than expectation may not look impressive from the outside at first. But what is steady will not fall when the winds of life return. The number 9 carries the vibration of endings, but not the kind we resist. These are the endings that bring relief, clarity, and a quiet exhale. If this number calls to you, you may be in a moment of emotional maturation, where you can finally release a pattern, person, or role that no longer aligns with your values. And yet, letting go is rarely easy. Even when something is no longer right, it can be familiar, and familiarity often feels like safety. But remember, the act of release is not abandonment. It is reverence. In one perspective of mindful living, holding on is a form of fear. Letting go, when done consciously, is a gesture of deep compassion toward yourself, and toward the cycles that brought you to this moment. Then there is the number 1, the spark, the seed, the breath before the leap. If this is the number that speaks to your heart, you are likely stepping into something new, not because anyone asked you to, but because your spirit whispered it was time. The number 1 doesn't wait for validation. It simply knows. But even beginnings can feel tender. Starting over, even when it's chosen, can come with self-doubt or questions of worth. Just remember, beginnings are sacred not because they are perfect, but because they hold potential. The first step is never about certainty, it's about trust. And that kind of trust can only come from within. Each of these numbers reflects a stage in your inner journey, and all are equally essential. You might be laying foundation, closing a chapter, or stepping into a new one, and none of these paths are better than the others. They are simply different kinds of movement. What matters is that you are honest about where you are, and gentle with yourself as you move through it. In many contemplative practices, the present moment is the only doorway to liberation. So wherever you are, whether holding a brick, burning an old script, or planting a new seed, this is enough. If one of these numbers resonates deeply with you, take a moment to feel into why. What truth is it quietly affirming inside you? What part of your current experience does it validate or illuminate? You don't need to rush the answer, just be with the energy of that number and let it speak to you in its own time. And if you feel called, share it in the comments. Let yourself be seen in the reflection of this journey. Write the number 4, 9, or 1 and receive the message your higher self has been waiting to deliver. Not from me, not from the stars, but from you. Leo, if you've stayed with me until this moment, I know something in your soul has already begun to shift. You've walked with me through the tangled layers of control, emotional weight, and unspoken expectations, and now you're standing at the edge of something deeply personal, the space where choice begins. Maybe you've been living in a loop, pulled back into roles you didn't choose, dynamics you've outgrown, or connections that only seem to honor you when you shrink yourself to fit. But what if today is the day you gently set that weight down? You've been strong for so long, not just in action, but in endurance. You've carried the silence. You've held space for others to grow, even when it cost you your peace. But strength is not always about holding on. Sometimes it's about letting go with grace. And today, the universe is not asking you to prove anything. It's asking you to remember. To remember that your worth has never been dependent on whether someone sees it. To remember that your value does not come from sacrifice, but from your presence steady, vibrant, and whole. From the first warning in this reading that a toxic cycle may be resurfacing to the reflections from the cards, from the stars, and from your own body's wisdom, one thread has been woven through it all. You are ready to live without performing. You are allowed to choose ease. You are allowed to walk away from what drains you. And most importantly, you are allowed to love yourself not because you fixed everything, but because you finally stopped abandoning yourself to fix others. This isn't just about leaving someone behind or cutting ties. It's about reclaiming the part of you that always knew you deserved better, but stayed silent out of fear. Can you trust that the version of you who's choosing rest, clarity, and peace is not weak but finally wise? Can you see that freedom was never going to be found in getting them to change, but in your own decision to stop letting them pull you out of alignment? Take a deep breath with me. Imagine this as your turning point, not a dramatic exit, but a quiet return. To yourself. To your center. To the Leo you were always meant to be, not the lion who roars to be heard, but the one who simply stands in their light and lets the world adjust. And so now, I ask you not as a guide, but as someone who deeply believes in your ability to shift your reality, what would it look like if you chose you today? What would change not in the world around you, but within your inner world if you gave yourself permission to stop proving and start being? If your heart is whispering yes, even softly, I invite you to anchor that choice with a simple act of affirmation. Comment below, I choose me. Say it as a declaration, not of ego, but of sacred commitment to your peace, your truth, and your energy. Let that comment be the moment you stepped into your next timeline. Before we part for now, let me take this moment to thank you from the deepest space of sincerity. Your time here means more than you know. Every view, every comment, every like and subscription helps grow this circle of awareness, healing, and empowerment. Eternal mindfulness isn't just a channel, it's a space for souls like yours to return to themselves again and again. So if you found value today, please consider subscribing, so we can continue walking this journey together. The universe always speaks, and when you're ready, I'll be right here to help you listen.